My next guest has been the president of Judicial Watch for some time. He's a New York Times bestselling author. His current book is Rights and Freedoms in Peril, an investigative report on the left's attack, now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Please welcome back to the program, Tom Fitton. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing great. Tom, before we get into your lawsuit against Fani Willis, talk to me about your reaction to the Hunter Biden pardon.
Well, with Biden, you have to ask, can it get any worse? And of course it does, repeatedly. And you have not only the specific pardon for the two crimes for which he was convicted and pled guilty, the gun crimes and then the tax crimes, but then you had this blanket pardon, which is extraordinary, for crimes known or unknown since 10 years ago up until December 1st. So who knows? Maybe he was doing coke in the White House on Saturday and he's been pardoned for it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that weirdness. But on top of that, attached to it was this tirade against his own Justice Department, falsely suggesting that it was politics behind the prosecutions. I mean, the only politics involved here was the cover-up of his crimes initially. The selective prosecution wasn't of him, but it was to selectively go after charges in a limited way so as to protect Joe. And as far as the Justice Department was concerned, they wanted him to be let off scot-free, practically speaking, until the judge started asking some uncomfortable questions where she asked, this is something that's important, have you ever had a plea deal like this ever before? And the Justice Department had to admit no.
Right.
No.
Right.
And so, but on the other hand, I don't know what Joe's mental state is. I suspect it's poor. I tell you, I was laughing the other day. If he had signed a will, I'd be questioning whether he had people challenge wills because they don't think the person signed it was all there. I don't think he's all there to sign this pardon. And the language in the pardon suggests it was written by the Hunter Biden operation, not by Joe. So will there be other pardons? I don't know. It depends who's in the White House and who gets to write them for Joe. I mean, I don't think he's competent to do this. And so I think also there's this constitutional problem that pardon has in terms of its broad nature. And if I were in the next Justice Department or independent prosecutor, whatever, I'd still be going full speed ahead and maybe fight it out in court.
Tom, one of the things I snarkily tweeted was perhaps Joe Biden doesn't remember that he said he wasn't going to pardon Hunter.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a pardon of himself and of his brother Jim, who's been implicated in all of the Hunter Biden schemes, where at least the head of the oversight committee claims about $27 million have somehow ended up in the pockets of Biden family members? Do you think that Joe's going to pardon himself and pardon other Biden family members before he leaves office?
I don't think he'll pardon himself. I think other family members may be pardoned given the scope of the racketeering operation the Biden family was engaged in. It wasn't just Joe, it was his brother. There were other family members that the House has delineated were benefiting from what looked to be a money laundering operation. So it wouldn't surprise me if other family members were pardoned. And now we're seeing today, I don't know if you've been watching the news or tracking the news online, both Politico and the Washington Post are reporting the Biden gang is going to start issuing pardons to everyone,
right,
practically speaking. Fauci, General Milley, Schiff,
Liz Cheney, yeah.
Because they don't want Trump to hold them accountable at all.
Yeah, I suggested Charlie Manson, Al Capone, Milli Vanilli. As long as you're doing this.
I mean, can he pardon his whole administration?
Yeah.
So they can never be prosecuted for anything they've done wrong? Is that the new standard?
Now,
and I hope, because usually with the typical Republican responses, there won't be any prosecutions or even serious investigations.
Right.
And I hope President Trump follows up on what he suggested he wants to do, which is to seriously take a look at the criminality related to the abuse of him through lawfare and the abuse of other Americans through lawfare, censorship. I mean, General Milley should be court-martialed given what he was up to. We just sued over him today You know, I didn't know this. This is in Woodward's book. He visited Garland at the Justice Department, and Milley asked Garland to investigate Americans and prosecute them, right-wing militias.
Right.
And they were talking about Donald Trump. You know, you hear this, the leftists talk about President Trump wants to sic the military on Americans. General Milley literally was the leader of our military targeting Americans.
Let's talk about your lawsuit against Fani Willis, the Fulton County DA. I think she said that there was no coordination between her and the Biden White House. You requested information, documents to corroborate this one way or the other. She didn't turn them over. You filed a lawsuit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it goes back even further than that. We had asked for the documents and they said there were none. But then the Congress is saying, well, no, there were communications with the January 6th committee, other reports, there were meetings at the Justice Department, et cetera, involving her office, her friend Nathan Wade, and such. So we're like, well, there's got to be documents. I mean, first of all, there's a letter that's been produced already by Congress. So we sued. And normally that just leads to the government, in this case, Fulton County, the DA's office, Fani Willis, saying, oh, you know, we're going to answer the lawsuit, and we argue over whether there are documents and where they search. Here, she didn't even respond to the complaint in a timely fashion, despite given not one, not two, but three opportunities to fix the issue by the court. And the court finally said, you're in default. You didn't answer Judicial Watch's lawsuit. So I'm going to order you to search for these documents and give them to Judicial Watch within 5 days, which means Monday. And so he found her in default of, her in default of in terms of answering the claim, and necessarily in violation of the open records law in Georgia. And when you read the decision, it's clear he expects the correspondence to be turned over to Judicial Watch. Now, she may try to object in some way to that happening in the end by asserting some type of privileges, but the writing's on the wall. The court wants this turned over.
What do you expect to find, and why do you suppose she didn't turn it over?
Well, is it a cover-up or incompetence? I'm not quite sure. But there's usually a mix of the two, right, when you're talking about the government. I think you're going to see coordination between Fulton County's DA's office, an elected Democrat, the Jack Smith operation, the Department of Justice, and the Pelosi Congress, the January 6th committee. You know, much of the indictment is almost verbatim out of some of the January 6th committee allegations and their so-called report. So it wouldn't be surprising if they were in communication. So I don't know why deny it. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons you could have used to justify communications about the issue.
Right.
But they knew people would rightly conclude that this was a conspiracy against Trump, and it was all politics. Politicians in D.C. and Georgia, members of the same political party, targeting the number one opponent of the Democratic Party for jailing.
Tom, the Hill described Judicial Watch as a conservative watch group. Does that description bother you?
No, it doesn't bother me. Of course, they don't describe anyone else as liberal or left.
Well, plus you've also gone after you've gone after Republicans in the past too.
The point is, they pretend that means Republican.
Right.
The fact is, we're nonpartisan. We sue Democrat and Republican administrations, Democrat and Republican controlled agencies. Heck, we probably filed more lawsuits against the Donald Trump administration than virtually anyone in terms of trying to get access to records.
Right, and that's why I asked whether or not you feel
in my view, being conservative means being in favor of small government, transparency, and recognizing there's a link between the two.
Right.
The bigger the government, the less transparency, and usually the more corruption.
Yeah. The first paragraph of the Hill was ordered Fani Willis turn over to a, quote, conservative watchdog group. I've watched your organization for many, many years. You've gone after Republicans. You've gone after Democrats. I just wondered whether or not you thought this was an unfair description of Judicial Watch.
Yeah, they're pretending it's controversial that we're suing and getting the records. I guess I appreciate your point. What's controversial is that in the first time in memory, I'm not aware of this ever happening again, a government official was found in default in one of the most basic lawsuits that agencies are sued, under which agencies are sued, which is the open records law. I mean, the idea that a government official couldn't figure out a way to respond in court to a Judicial Watch lawsuit, that to me is the scandal. The fact that she had to now subsequently been ordered to be to turn over these records within 5 days, that's the extraordinary nature of it. It's not who's asking, it's the conduct of the government officials.
Right.
And the left likes to kind of pretend those of us demanding accountability are the controversial folks, as opposed to the folks who are requiring us to file lawsuits because they don't want to follow the law. That's the controversy in my view.
Tom, we have 45 seconds left. Are you surprised that Joe Biden and his family have gotten away with what they've gotten away with? Again, allegedly $27 million somehow found its way in the pockets of various Biden family members. Nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's been indicted other than Hunter Biden for tax and for gun charges. Are you surprised they've gotten away with so much?
I'm not surprised, but I'm also outraged because I think it could have been different. I mean, we could have had a serious impeachment. We could have had pressure to generate special counsel investigations in a more serious way, but there was little interest from the Republican Party. But, you know, I think there's got to be a change in approach, and hopefully President Trump breaks this cycle of just letting the left get away with criminality.
Tom Fitton, President of Judicial Watch. Tom, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always.
Hey, you're welcome.